Boker tells today's daf yomi is Kesubos, daf mem tes, Kesubos 49. And let us go to the top of 49a, where the Gemara is continuing its discussion of a girl who was betrothed, and then her father sent her to the husband, but she didn't actually go into the husband's home yet. She was taken by the husband's agents to be brought to the husband's home. So the Gemara discusses that the Mishnah says at the point that she leaves her father's domain and goes to the husband's agents, that's like she's fully married to the husband at that point. So on top of Mem Tesam and Aleph, Gemara asks the question, Rashi interprets this as a question, an independent question. Maybe even though she was handed over to the husband's agents and she's fully married, maybe at that point, if she would go back to her father's home, she would go back to her initial status and she would no longer be fully married, but she would have been betrothed at that point. And Rashi says that the nafkamina, the distinction would be in a case where she was adulterous at that point, would she get the punishment for being adulterous as a betrothed girl or as a fully married girl? So maybe that's the case. Maybe we could say that if she goes back, even though she was with her agents of the husband, maybe she could still return to her father's home. Rava says, Hahu Kfar Paska. We already determined that law. Because Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel. The Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel already determined it. The Tana Debei Rabbi Shmuel states, V'neder almana ugusha kol asher asra al nafsha yakum aleha. It says the vows of a widow or a divorcee, Baruch Atah Adonai, the vows of a widow or a divorcee, whatever she would prohibit upon herself, Yakum Aleha, whatever vow she makes upon herself will be valid. Ma'atam Omer, what's the purpose of this verse? To tell us that whatever vows she makes are valid. The Torah is referring to a widow or divorcee, so she's clearly not in the domain of her husband or in the domain of her father anymore. So of course her vows are valid. So what's it referring to when it says this verse? Let's say the father has handed her over to the agents of the husband. So let's say the father has handed over to the agents of the husband, or the husband has handed, or the agents of the father handed her over to the agents of the husband. And then she became widowed or divorced before she actually went into the husband's home. How could I call her that she's in the father's home or the husband's home anymore? She's not. So this verse is telling us when she has gone out from her father's home, even for one moment, like in this case where she went to the agents, then she's no longer able to return. So we already know this concept that she cannot go back to her initial status when she was already accepted by the husband's agents. And Amar Papa Afana Nami Tanina. Papa says we also have learned this explicitly. It says Rav Papa, we learned this in the Mishnah where it's stated Haba al Nara Murasa Eino Chayev, that somebody who has the relations with a Nara Amurasa, with a betrothed Nara, this adolescent, Eino Chayev Achete Nara Besua Murasa Vehiva Beisavia. You're not going to be liable for the stoning. The stoning is a very specific violation. That's only when do you get stoning? Unless she was a Nara, meaning between that 6-month period of adolescence, and also she was a Besula, she had to have been a virgin, Mu'urasa, she had to have been betrothed, Vehiba Beisavia, she needed to still be in her father's home. So the Gemara says, I understand why we need all of these terms. of the Mishnah. Bishlam and Nara. Well, why does it need to be a Nara? Because it doesn't apply to her. It doesn't apply. He will not get the stoning if she was a Bogeris, if she was an adult. I understand why it says Besula. I mean, why she needs to be a virgin for Ba'ula. She cannot have been full. She cannot have been a non-virgin. Murad says, I understand what the word betrothed means. It's coming to exclude a Nisua, not a woman who was fully married. But the base of what does it mean to say when she has to be in her father's home in order for you to get the punishment of stoning? Isn't it coming to exclude this scenario of Masar that the father has handed her over to the agents of the husband, and so therefore she's no longer able to be considered an arusa at that point, about a girl who would get, if you were adulterous with her, you would get the stoning. Amar Nachum Bar Yitzchak, Afanana Mitinina. So Rabbi Nachum Bar Yitzchak says we also have a Mishnah, another Mishnah from Sanhedrin, where it states Habal Eishes Ish, a person who has the intercourse with the married woman, Kivan Shenichnas Al Rishus Habal Nesuin, once she enters into her husband's jurisdiction with respect to full marriage, even though they did not have the consummation yet, one who has adultery with her will get chanek, will get strangulation. So if we see from here, it says nichnas al rishus habal va'alma. It doesn't talk about going into the chuppah; it just says going into his jurisdiction. Shema mina must be that we're talking about a case where she was accepted by his agents, even though she has not yet gone all the way to his home yet. So the Gemara therefore proves that point, that once she has gone to the agents, there's no going back to her father's home. Says the Mishnah, in the middle of 49a, says the Mishnah, Av Enochayev the Mizonos Bito, the father is not going to be responsible to support his daughter while he is alive. The Rashi says we're talking about while the father is alive, he's not obligated to support her, but the support that he's required to give to her is after he's dead. And Midrash Darash Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah lefnei Chachamim b'Kerem b'Yavneh. This was a drasha that Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah expounded before the sages in Kerem b'Yavneh. Kerem b'Yavneh was the yeshiva that they established in Yavneh, and it was called the Vineyards of Yavneh because they used to sit in rows, and a vineyard was also in rows. And this is what Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah expounded. Rashi says on the day that he was appointed the Nasi. This takes us back to the dispute on the top of 28a in Brachos. We'll start on the bottom of 27b, where Rabbi Gamliel was deposed because the yeshiva felt he didn't treat Rabbi Yeshua respectfully, so they deposed him, and then they wanted to put in Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah. And that night, his wife said to him, "You're too young." So he grew a beard that night, a gray beard, and that's what he says. Behold, I was like 70 years old. And so that day that they appointed him to be the Rosh Yeshiva, it says they made several changes, and one of the changes was he opened up the base medrash, let more people in, but also that day he expounded that as follows. He said that the father was not responsible to support his daughter while he's alive, and how did he know that? Because it says Abanam Yershuv Abanos Izona, because the rabbis instituted that the sons will inherit, and here we're not talking about regular inheritance, that when a father dies, the sons inherit, because that's a biblical law. Here we're talking about what's called Kesubos banim dichrin, that the rabbis instituted the following law, that if a girl brings in a dowry, a large dowry, her father would not want the dowry in the case where she dies to go to his son-in-law's other children when he remarries. So the law is that her dowry gets passed down to the next generation to her children, and therefore the husband doesn't inherit it. That's called Kesubos banim dichrin. And also on top of that, so we say that, so Abanam Yershuv, Abanos Izonu, the Ksuba states that the girls have to be supported. Ma banam ein yorshin. So says Rabbi Elazar ben Azariah, just like the girls, just like the sons only inherit la'achar misasav, just like the Kesubos and dichrin, they get their money only after the father dies. Avabanos einan mizonos el achar misasavian. Also, the girls, they're only supported after their father's death. So the Gemara says, b'mizonos. So the Gemara makes a diuk, it makes an inference in their father, in the Mishnah. B'mizonos bito hu deinu chayiv. He's not obligated to support his daughter, but doesn't the implication there have a b'mizonos b'no chayav? He is obligated to support his son even while he is alive. He is obligated to support his son. And the Gemara says on the second inference, bito nami chovu doeka, his daughter also is not obligated on mitzvah ika, but doesn't disprove that there is actually a great mitzvah to support your daughter while you are alive. So money must nisin. So the Gemara asks, well, these two diukim, first of all, that A, you are obligated to support your son while you're alive, and B, it is a mitzvah to support your daughter. Who is our Mishnah like? Money must nisin, lo Rabbi Meir, lo Rabbi Huda, lo Rabbi Yochanan and Broka, the Tanya, because what are we going in a brayso? Mitzvah lazuna sabanos. It's a mitzvah to support the daughters. Kal v'chomer labanim, and how much more so they have to support the sons? The aski b'Torah, because they engage in Torah study. That's the position of Rabbi Meir. So this is not like our Mishnah, because our Mishnah says you're obligated to support your sons, not that it's a mitzvah. Rabbi Yehuda says mitzvah lazuna sabanim and kal v'chomer labanos, and for sure it's a mitzvah to support your daughters mishum zilusa, because otherwise it's disrespectful to them. They have to go begging on the street. It's also not like our Mishnah, because here it also says it's a mitzvah to support your children, and our Mishnah seems to be saying it's obligatory. Rabbi Yochanan Broka, Omer Chova lazuna sabanos. He says it's obligatory to support your daughters, the achar misa savi, and after their father dies. But while the father is alive, neither one is supported. Our Mishnah's inference was that the son is obligatory and the daughter is a mitzvah. So Rabbi Yochanan Baruch is not like our Mishnah. So it says the Gemara, Mani Masnisin. Who's our Mishnah like? Rabbi Meir Amar Bana Mitzvah. Meir says that the sons is a mitzvah. Our Mishnah says it's obligatory. Rabbi Yehuda Amar. Rabbi Yehuda Hamar Nami Bana Mitzvah. He also says the son's a mitzvah, and our Mishnah says it's obligatory. And Rabbi Yochanan Broka, I feel mitzvah Nami Leika. Rabbi Yochanan says doesn't even say there's a mitzvah to support your children. So for that reason, who's our Mishnah like? So the Gemara says Ibayisem Rabbi Meir, Ibayisem Rabbi Yehuda, Ibayisem Rabbi Yochanan Broka. Actually, we could say it's like any one of these three. Ibayisem Rabbi Meir, V'achikamar. You could say it's like Rabbi Meir. This is what we say. This is how Rabbi Meir would read the Mishnah. The father is not obligated to support his daughter. No. And it's the same thing that he's not obligated to support his son. Ha-mitzvah bebito ika. But from the fact that it says he's not obligated to support his daughter, it means that there is a mitzvah to support his daughter. And kal or chomer lebanim. And for sure it's a mitzvah to support your sons. And why does it just seem to imply that you're not obligated to support your daughter, but there's a mitzvah by your daughter? Why doesn't it say anything that it is a mitzvah to support your son? Because Kamash 1, it's teaching us on top of 49b that filu bito chovu deleka ha-mitzvah ika. That even though you by your daughter, it's not a obligation. Nevertheless, there is a mitzvah to support her, and that's the inference the Mishnah wanted us to take. If you buy the same Rabbi Yehuda, you could also say Mishnah like Rabbi Yehuda, who says it's a mitzvah for the son and kal v'chomer for the daughter to be supported while he's alive. If you buy the same Rabbi Yehuda, it says we read the Mishnah that the father is not obligated to support his daughter, but kol sheken of no, for sure he's not obligated to support his son. A mitzvah b'no ika. But so for the fact that he's not obligated to support his daughter, and for sure he's not obligated to support his son, that improves there is a mitzvah to support his son. The kal v'chomer of knows, and for sure for the daughters. So why did it say he's not obligated to support his daughter? That is teaching us that when it comes to his daughter, there's not even an obligation, even though it's mishum suhusa, that it's a greater mitzvah. So the Bayezema, then we have a third approach, which is how we can fit Rabbi Yochanan Broka's position in Malchi Kamar. Eno Chai b'Mezonos Bito says you're not obligated to support his daughter. What does our Mishnah mean? Who I do know. That means also you're not obligated to support the son. The mitzvah namilek, and it means you're not obligated to support your son, and it's not even a mitzvah to support your son. Va'idi debanos la'achar misas avian chova, and since the daughters after the father dies, there's an obligation to support it from the ksuva. Tani nami eno chayav. Therefore, it states by the daughters that they're not obligatory. Amar Rabbi Yehuda, Amar Reish Lakish, V'Shem Rabbi Yehuda bar Chanina. So Rabbi Yehuda says in the name of Reish Lakish, the name of Rabbi Yehuda bar Chanina, but Usha Eskino, in Usha they instituted Shea Adam Zanas Banav Espinosav Kashen Katanim. He said in Usha they instituted that they have to support, a man has to support his sons and his daughters when they are minors still. Rashi says we're talking about until they bring forth their signs of puberty, that you're obligated to support them. That was the institution of Usha, but prior to Usha, we already saw that it was a mitzvah and a mitzvah to support your children. And now they're saying that you have to support them all the way until they have gone through puberty or started puberty. So the Gemara asks, is the law like Rabbi Yehuda bar Chanina that you have to support your children all the way until they begin puberty? Tashma, when they came before Rabbi Yehuda, Amar lahu, and who came before Rabbi Yehuda? There were people who were refusing to support their children. He said to them, Yarod Yalda, a jackal is giving birth, Rabbanei Masa Shadya. So he's trying to pressure them. He's saying you're like a jackal gives birth and you're throwing your kids on the city. He's trying to shame them into supporting their children. Why does he have to shame them? Because he doesn't have the law in his court. And so therefore he tries to embarrass them. But the reality is that they weren't obligated. When it came for Rav Chisda, he said, Kafale asita b'tzibura. He said, Rav Chisda said, when this father was brought before him because he wasn't supporting his children, he said, turn over a mortar, and stand on it, and say, Orva bai b'nei. A raven takes care of its own children. This guy is not even taking care of his children. The Gemara asked the question, does a raven really take care of his children? God provides bread or food to the offspring of the ravens who call out, meaning to say that the raven's parents are not providing. So the Gemara says, it depends. The raven is white or black. Two explanations here, at least two. Rashi says the white raven is when it's born, and so the parents don't recognize it. The black raven is when it grows older, and then the parents provide for it. Tosfos says it refers to two different types of ravens. One is white, one is black, and one of them is more supportive than the other. Yeah, we also comment the Rava Amarlei Nicholech the Mitzani Banech Mitzdaka. When the deadbeat dads were brought before Rava, he said, is it good for you that you want your children, your offspring to be supported by charity? Is that what you want? When did Rava say this? Only when did he try to embarrass them into supporting? When they weren't wealthy. But if they were wealthy, then we force them, even against their will, to support their children. And the reason is because we're allowed to force people to give charity. And because, as Rashi says, let's talk about Alma, meaning to say, Rashi says, because even if he had no children, we could force him to give tzedakah. So here, under these circumstances, we could force him, and it'll be like tzedakah that we're forcibly take from him. Like Rava once forced Rav Nasan bar Ami, and he took out from him 400 zuz for charity. So we see from here that you can force somebody to give the charity. Amar Rabbi Eli, well, Tosfos is going to question that at the bottom. We'll see it. The Tosfos question, but Amar Rabbi Eli, Amar Reish Lakish, Ba'usha Eskinu. Okay, so we say, let's just look at this Tosfos now. How could you force him to give charity? How is that allowed? Tosfos says in the third Tosfos on the page, how could you force the person to give the charity? It's a commandment where the charity is written, the reward is written on the side of it. So because it says so that you'll be blessed. We have in Gemara and Chulin, it says that if the mitzvah is written if the reward is written next to the mitzvah, the court is not commanded, is not allowed to force on it. So Tosfos says you didn't really force him, you forced him with words. You didn't beat him, you strongly encouraged him. This is problematic because the Gemara, seems like a forced answer, because the Gemara's explanation was saying with words, they were already forcing him with words. So that we need to look into more. And some say, so he says, no, they weren't forcing him specifically to give charity, but they basically had an agreement in the town that everybody had to give this amount of money for each month. So it's not specifically about the mitzvah tzedakah, it's just a general obligation he has to give. And the third answer Tosfos gives is that there's other prohibitions. There's a commandment to give the charity, but in addition to that, there's two prohibitions. Don't close your hand. And so therefore, that's the reason why we could force him here, because he was in violation of those prohibitions. So it says the Gemara, Amar Rabbi Eli, Amar Reish Lakish, but Usha Iskinu, and Usha they instituted. So now we're going to go for the remainder of this daf and also the beginning of tomorrow's daf. We're going to talk about the takanot that they instituted in Usha. Usha was one of the stops that the Sanhedrin made after they were exiled from the Lishkas HaGazis, the human chamber on the Temple Mount. So then they went to a series of stops, Yavne and Usha. So this is the takana they made in Usha. Kosef kol nachasav lefanav. So we're saying this takana because we said other takanas about Usha. First, we said that he has to support his children. That Usha Eskino, that they have to support their children when they're young. But now they made another takana. What was it? Takana kosef kol nachasav lefanav. So that somebody writes that they're giving away all their estate to their children, the takana was that you're not allowed to give away all your money. It's so much so that you personally and your wife are not supported from it. It means that you've given away everything except enough to support you and your wife. So they challenged this because it says Gedolah mizu amru. They taught amana nizonas minachasav. They said that his widow himself is supported from his estate, meaning to say, even if it's more distance. So the widow herself is supported. Rashi explains, but Gedolah mizu amru. They said something even more of a chiddush. They said could go on amano bas. Let's say the man dies and leaves behind a widow and a daughter gets married, and even though now the father is dead, and now the nechasim, the property, there's a lien on them by the husband, the daughter's husband, in a sense, is considered a purchaser by the rabbi, so he has a lien on all the property. Could go and baba nefsei ishto, like a husband with his wife's estate. And even though the wife is supported, she's not supported from nechasim mishubadim, from property where there's a lien on it. Nevertheless, but nevertheless, in this case, we're not concerned that the world is going to be messed up, like in this case, because he didn't spend money to purchase it. The rabbi said he's like an heir. And we say that the widow is supported from this estate. So when we say the widow is supported, for sure he and his wife should be supported. The widow is even further removed. So the Gemara says, as Rabin sent in a letter, somebody who dies and leaves behind his widow and his daughter, his widow is supported from his estate. Nises habas almanaso nizonos minachasav. And let's say the daughter gets married, the widow is still supported from his estate. Let's say the daughter died. Let's say the daughter died, and her husband has inherited her. And Rabbi Yossi Bar Chanina says, I had such an incident. And I said, his widow is, so in the case where he says, the widow is supported by the estate, for sure he and his wife are supported. So why does it even need to make this takana? So therefore, Gemara says, no, he might have said, maybe the widow has to be supported by the estate because there's nobody who's going to go to work there. The widow is not going to work. Let him go to work and let the man who gave away all his possessions to his children, let him go to work and support himself and his wife. We might have thought that we say that, Kamash Malon, we don't say that. Mara asks the question, this refers back to the statement of Rabbi Eli, and we're asking this question, is the law like Rabbi Eli or not, that if a person gives all of his money to his children while he's alive, are he and his wife still supported from that gift? Tashmad, Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yonasan Abikayim. Rabbi Chanina and Rabbi Yonasan were standing there. Also, Gavra, Gachav, and Nashkel, or Rabbi Yonasan Akari. There's a person who came along and he bent down and he kissed Rabbi Yonasan on his legs. Amalei, Rabbi Chanina, my hi. He says, what is going on? Why are you being kissed on the feet? Amalei, Kosef, Nechasel Banafil. He was somebody who wrote all of his money to his children. He gave away to his children as a gift. Va'asitinu wazane. And I forced his children to support him. Now, so from the fact that he forced them, that shows that he went beyond the letter of the law. Now, if you want to say that it's not the law, that's why he had to force him. So, but if you say that in fact it was the support, in fact it was the law, then why did he have to force him? He just says that this is the law, just enforce the law. So that for that reason, he went beyond the letter of the law. So we see that the law is not like Rabbi Eli, that technically speaking, that if a person gave away all his money, his children are not required to support him from that estate that he gave away. So we'll just finish with this line, which we'll discuss tomorrow. It also relates to this week's parasha. Amar Rabbi Eli, Barusha Eskinu. In Usha, they instituted Hamavazves, and one who wants to give charity, Al Yavazves, Yo Ser Mechomesh. Rashi says specifically to poor people. You'll see the Chavetz Chaim actually says this doesn't apply to supporting Torah institutions for a different reason, but the one who gives money to charity to poor people is not allowed to give more than 20%. And Tanya Nami, indeed we have a brayso, Hamavazves. You're not allowed to give more than 20% of your money to charity. Maybe because what's going to happen is you're going to end up needing money yourself. Rashi, Tosu says that the Yerushalmi says that the first time you could give 20%, and then from then on every year you'll give 20% of your income. But the first time you give 20% of all your assets, and then you give 20% of your income. So there was an incident, and his friends did not allow him. Rabbi Yeshivav, this is the second time we had him in our tractate before he was going and screaming at Rabbi Akiva, "You're making mamzerim." Remember that earlier. And here Rabbi Yeshivav says that you're not allowed to give more than 20% to charity. And so the Amrila, some say Rabbi Yeshivav wanted to give V'lo inicho chavero, and his friend didn't allow him. Umanu Rabbi Akiva, and it was Rabbi Akiva who didn't allow it. So we'll pick this up, God willing, in the next stuff. Anybody have any questions? I'm happy to address it.